Today, we're going to trace the incredible journey of Siddhartha Gautama, a prince who, and I mean this literally, had everything a person could ever want, but he felt this undeniable pull to find the one thing that truly mattered, an answer to human suffering. I mean, really think about that question. It's right at the heart of this entire story. This isn't just ancient history, it's a deep dive into a search for meaning that would end up reshaping the spiritual landscape of the world. So let's get into it. Okay, so our story kicks off with a royal birth in the Sakyan kingdom. But right from the start, it was clear this was no ordinary prince. His arrival was marked by this extraordinary prophecy that would basically set the course for his entire life. Yeah, a seer named Asita looked at the infant prince and saw two completely different paths. He said, look, this kid will either become a great king, a conqueror of the world, or he'll give it all up to become a great teacher, an awakened one. Well, that one prophecy sent his father, King Suddhodana, on a mission. You see, the king was absolutely determined to make sure his son became a ruler, and to do that, he built what you can only call a perfect cage of pleasure. Siddhartha had 3 palaces, one for each season. Lotus ponds were created just for him. He was entertained only by beautiful women. He was literally shielded from any hint of hardship. His life was this bubble of absolute luxury, all designed to keep him from ever questioning his perfect world. But here's the thing about a cage, right? No matter how gilded it is, it's still a cage. The prince's curiosity about what was going on outside the palace walls just grew and grew until it became unbearable. He insisted on seeing his city, and his father, after trying to stage manage the whole thing, finally agreed. This trip? Well, it was about to shatter his perfect world. On his first trip out, he saw something that just stopped him in his tracks. An old man, bent over, frail. Now you have to remember, he'd never seen old age before. He was horrified. He turned to his charioteer, Channa, and asked, will I become like that? And Channa's simple, honest answer, that yes, this happens to everyone, was the first major crack in the walls of his perfect world. Next, he saw a person just ravaged by disease. He had never even considered the idea of illness. Channa had to explain that any body can get sick at any time, and that revelation, that his own body, his very self was that fragile, was a profound shock. Suddenly, those palace walls didn't feel so safe anymore. But the most shattering sight of all was a funeral procession. For the very first time in his life, he was confronted with a dead body. Channa had to explain the concept of death itself, that it's an absolute, unavoidable end for every single living being. The thought that his parents, his wife, his newborn son, and even he himself would one day just stop existing, it was completely and utterly terrifying. Just as this total despair was about to swallow him whole, he saw one last thing. It was a man with a shaved head in a simple robe, walking with this incredible sense of calm and purpose. Channa explained that this was a renunciate, someone who had left the world behind to find an escape from all the suffering. And in that man's quiet calm, Siddhartha saw a flicker of hope. And that was it. That question just started burning in his mind. The palace, the luxury, all the pleasures, they all seemed so hollow and meaningless now, compared to this fundamental problem. He knew he couldn't go back to living a life of blissful ignorance. He had to find an answer. That very night, the decision was made. He took one last look at his sleeping wife and his newborn son, and then he just slipped out of the palace in the dead of night. This moment, it's known as the Great Departure, and it changed everything. At 29 years old, he traded his fine, royal clothes for a simple cloth, cut his own hair, and sent his servant Channa back to the palace with his horse and all his jewels. He was now a homeless wanderer, choosing to step from the absolute peak of privilege into the deepest possible uncertainty. So, for the next 6 years, Siddhartha threw himself completely into his search. He studied with the most famous spiritual teachers he could find. And while he mastered all their techniques, he felt like their answers were still incomplete. So he turned to a different path: extreme self-denial. He pushed his body to the absolute limit. I mean, he truly believed that by punishing his physical self, he could somehow liberate his spirit. He practiced holding his breath until his head felt like it would explode. He ate so little that his body just wasted away to skin and bones, and he would often just faint from pure exhaustion. But wisdom never came. Okay, so this is a really crucial point. He had now lived at both ends of the spectrum. The life of total, mindless indulgence in the palace, that didn't bring him any lasting happiness. And the life of torturous self-denial out in the forest, well, that just weakened his mind and brought him to the brink of death. Neither extreme held the answer he was looking for. After nearly dying of starvation, he finally accepted a small bowl of rice milk from a village girl, and his 5 ascetic companions who were with him, they were disgusted. They thought he'd given up the quest, and they abandoned him. But this small act of nourishment, it was actually the breakthrough he needed. He realized a simple but totally profound truth. You need a healthy body to have a clear and strong mind. The path to awakening wasn't about punishing yourself or indulging yourself. It was about balance. He called this discovery the middle way. He later used this amazing analogy of tuning a lute, just like a musician knows, right? If the strings are too tight, they snap. If they're too loose, they won't make good music. He realized the mind is exactly the same way. It needs a balanced, moderate approach to find real clarity and wisdom. So with his strength back and this brand new insight, he sat down under a large tree, which we now call the Bodhi tree, and he made a vow. He swore he would not get up from that spot until he found the final answer. And through a long night of incredibly deep meditation, he broke through all the veils of ignorance and saw the nature of reality with perfect clarity. In that moment, Siddhartha Gautama was gone, and in his place was the Buddha, the awakened one. So after this incredible awakening, he had a choice. He could keep this profound understanding to himself, or he could try to teach it to a world that was pretty deep in its own confusion. Out of sheer compassion, he chose to teach. He walked for weeks to a deer park in Sarnath to find those same 5 ascetics who had left him behind. And in his very first sermon, he laid it all out. He didn't start with some complex philosophy, but with something that sounds a lot like a doctor's diagnosis. First, the truth of suffering, or dukkha, the diagnosis. Then, the cause of that suffering. Then, the good news, the prognosis, that there's an end to it. And finally, the prescription, the path to that end. This framework, the 4 Noble Truths, is the bedrock of everything he would ever teach. And the solution, the actual prescription he offered, wasn't just a single belief you had to adopt. It was a practical, step-by-step guide for living. This is the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a complete training manual that covers everything from our understanding and intentions to how we speak and act, all the way to how we train our minds with mindfulness and concentration. This was the answer he had spent 6 long years searching for. And so this incredible journey that started with a prince feeling uncomfortable in his perfect palace ended with the discovery of a universal truth. He didn't offer a religion based on faith in a god. He offered a path of personal effort and inquiry that's available to literally anyone, no matter who you are or where you come from. His entire quest was sparked not by trying to run away from life's problems, but by looking right at them, at aging, sickness, and death. And so it leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. In our own lives, what becomes possible when we stop trying to avoid what's difficult and instead turn around and face it with a little courage and clarity?